Hello everybody, welcome back to the channel. So in today's video, I do want to speak about Marc Bernal and whether he could be the next great pivot for FC Barcelona. Now, I know that this is a tall order because the player that has just left Barcelona that conquered the midfield, it was Sergio Busquets. So bringing in any player, even if it's Rodri, even if it's Joshua Kimmich, any player that you can find out there that is very experienced in Europe would have a hard time replacing Sergio Busquets. So when we do talk about Marc Bernal and how he could replace Sergio Busquets and mimic who he was in terms of profile, of course, it is a tall order, but we do want to get as close to another player like Sergio Busquets as much as possible. We don't necessarily believe that Marc Bernal will ever get to the level of Sergio Busquets. I mean, like, as Barcelona fans, we hope that he does, but we don't expect him to because the level is just too high. But even having a player that was 70% of Sergio Busquets in his prime would be massive for FC Barcelona, and the closest that we can get to Sergio Busquets is through Marc Bernal. After what he has been showing through the preseason, we can safely say he does stand a good chance. So Barcelona in the past 2 to 3 years have been relentless on their search for a perfect pivot, but they have been unsuccessful. Looking at Marc Bernal in the past 2 months does give us a good chance. And funny enough, of course, he's going to be coming through La Masia. And so now at just 17 years old, Marc Bernal will be included into Hansi Flick's Barcelona squad. So it is quite clear that even though he is going to be in the squad this season, time is going to be needed. We should not expect for Bernal to explode within these next 6 to 7 months. And so the whole idea for this season specifically is for us to incorporate a double pivot that might include Gavi and Frankie, or Gavi and Christensen, or it could be what we have seen under Xavi Hernandez, which is Frankie and Andreas Christensen. This would allow for us to give Bernal more time and for him to improve in certain aspects of his game. So let's talk about his background and his development. Marc Bernal is a 17-year-old midfielder currently playing for Barça Atlètic. He has been rising through the ranks, starting from the youth team and under 16 squad before making the leap to the senior team during the 2024-2025 preseason. Seeing his body type, he is quite a tall player, a little limpy. He does need to gain a little bit of more muscle, maybe be as bulky as someone like Rodri, so he can win on 1v1 defensive duels. But overall, his body structure does replicate what Sergio Busquets was. He's just tall, lanky. It just gives you that impression, right? But that is not certainly, but I mean not be good enough for football, and especially looking at how this sport is going, football is going to be much more physical, and he does need to combat with that. Now, he does have mental toughness and has tactical understanding, so because he has been a product of La Masia, Bernal is very familiar with Barcelona's ethos and philosophy. Usually, when he is on duels, he remains very composed, he is sharp, he is resilient on tracking back, marking his opponents, but once again, it does go back to his physical attributes. He needs to really improve on that. Facing a player like Lukaku or maybe even Erling Haaland would really destroy him. So Bernal is much more of a tempo setter, somebody who likes to recycle play. He's also responsible for retaining the ball and finding players between the lines, so he can be very creative when he does need to. His best work also comes from outside the opposition's box, where he finds the most time and space for him to operate. So unlike Sergio Busquets, I would say that Bernal is much more similar to Rakitic or Toni Kroos, somebody who can make and create danger just outside the box. And according to Total Football Analysis, they have claimed that Bernal does top certain categories like received passes per 90 and deployed passes per 90, which basically does indicate his comfort with build-up and handling high volumes of play. So he is very involved in almost all games. However, he's not the biggest ball progressor or the first receiver in the team. Hence the reason why when we saw Ter Stegen pass the ball to Bernal and one of the players got the ball from him because he was very unaware of who was pressuring him, it goes to show that right now he cannot be relied on to be the first receiver when Barcelona is playing out from the back. I believe that Frankie de Jong suits that role much better. His role does rely on dictating play and stabilizing the possession. So in Barcelona's first team, if Hansi Flick does decide to use Bernal in the double pivot position with us playing real games, not through friendlies, I believe that if you want to have a balanced midfield, you need to pair Bernal with somebody that can be a first receiver like Frankie de Jong. So a double pivot of Bernal and Frankie de Jong would work wonders. It would not necessarily work with Bernal and Gavi because Gavi does not have that true capability of being the first receiver at the back like Frankie de Jong. So even though his skill sets does rely much more in deeper positions, Bernal is also really influential in advanced areas. In the previous season, he did register 5 assists, the most in his team, and tied for 3rd among midfielders in the league. And he also did numbered 2.47 expected assists, which is the 4th most in the team. His key passes often come from similar areas on the pitch, typically from between the lines and just at the entrance to the final third, indicating he does have a preference for delivering key passes from these zones. Now, going to his defensive game, Bernal compensates for his physical shortcomings with his excellent game reading and positioning, something that Sergio Busquets used to do at his time. His defensive territory territory is also very deep and most active around the middle of the pitch, particularly responsible for blocking the entrance for his team's defensive third. So even though he's not a volume dueler, right, somebody who constantly duels over and over again, when he does, he's very efficient and he wins those defensive duels 69.86% of the time, ranking him in 5th in the league for the success rate. Also, Bernal rarely goes to the ground when he does tackle, and he's able to do that because he has long legs. Again, very similar to Sergio Busquets. He can wrap around his legs through a opponent and dominate certain angles, which makes his profile very interesting. So you can see that he is a player that does have weaknesses, some strengths. I would even say that usually by the 75th minute or the 80th minute, he does seem very drained, like he cannot handle a full 90-minute match yet, which is okay because he's only 17 years old. When he does have to face against a team like Atletico Madrid where you are expected to run a lot, I don't think that Bernal can give you 90 minutes. He's going to have to be rotated through a player like Gavi or maybe someone like Andreas Christensen. There has been stats and data showing that his loose ball duels and clearances do decline in effectiveness very late in matches, which means that he does have to improve on his stamina and his physical endurance. It all goes back to him building a better build for his body. So to me, Marc Bernal is a exceptional pivot and somebody who can definitely improve and grow and have him become whatever Barcelona do need, because he's very raw as a player. And there are certainly issues to address, like handling tight spaces, physical underperformances, and also having a great right foot because he is left-footed and he usually likes to do everything with his left foot. Him getting better with his right foot would unlock different angles as a pivot, which would help us get out from the back much better. Hence the reason why, right, we're kind of going full circle now. Hence the reason why I think that going into this season, we need to give him time and we need to be patient. We cannot allow for us to say that Bernal should be a player that we need him to be like tomorrow because we want him to be starting in the double pivot position because we don't have a player like Sergio Busquets. No, we cannot say that. Bernal needs to be given time, and I think that Hansi Flick for now will be relying on Frankie, Christensen, and Gavi, and Casado, of course, to reinforce the double pivot position. And let me tell you, like, trying to replicate what Sergio Busquets was back in his prime years is going to be very tough. His legacy looms large over any pivot that can step into his role. Like, Sergio Busquets' genius came from his ability to avoid pressure, carve out spaces, maintaining simplicity and efficiency in his play. And his brilliance also came from what did not happen, right? Because he was able to avoid turnovers, block passing lanes, and he never had to chase down counterattacks because he was always in the right places. That came through experience. That came through trial and error. Bernal is going to have to go through that within these next 2 to 3 years. He's only 17 years old. He has time. Coaches like Guardiola, Del Bosque always admired Sergio Busquets because he was flawless, fundamental in his ability to transform Barcelona's play through his understanding. So Marc Bernal's journey is only the beginning, and he does have quite a distance before he can reach Sergio Busquets' level in terms of talent, intelligence, and understanding of the game. But he is headed towards the right direction. And so that is it. That is going to be wrapping up today's video. Thank you guys.